welcome. I am Tony Rhodes and this is Narrative Wargamer, and this is going to be one of my first videos explaining all about what narrative play is to me. If this is your first time here, then welcome to the channel. I'm Tony and I run the Narrative Wargamer, which as of now basically is starting to extend out into YouTube videos, which is great and wonderful, and it means I get to talk to you guys about all the different things relating to Warhammer 40,000 and narrative play. Now, those of you that know, I have been running the Narrative Wargamer Podcast now for a good number of years, and moving on to YouTube videos like this represents the sort of next step for Narrative Wargamer. So honestly, it's kind of great that I'm able to do this now. So yeah, if you like what you hear in this video today and you're interested in hearing more about the sort of stuff that we've talked about in terms of narrative play in Warhammer 40,000, then go check out the Narrative Wargamer Podcast. Say there's a couple of years of backlog now that you can go through if you wanted, or you can just pick up and join us as we go through our sort of fortnightly or monthly episodes. As you can imagine, the main thing we talk about on the show is everything to do with sort of fun and casual play and narrative play in particular, and what it means to us, how we engage with the hobby, and how we like to play our games of Warhammer. And for me personally, that's what this video is about. I'd like to share, some of my beliefs and concepts on what narrative play is within Warhammer 40,000, and sort of give you guys an idea of what we're going to be doing here on the channel. So for today, I'm going to quickly go over my interpretations of the Freeways to play as presented by Games Workshop. I'm going to run through a couple of the misconceptions about narrative play that I think often a lot of people can have, and I'm going to sort of break down how I personally like to approach narrative play and the sort of styles of games that I regularly play with friends when we play games, and what I'm hoping to start showcasing here on the channel in the future. So yeah, and then hopefully you guys, if you're interested, you can give them a go yourself. So yeah, let's get started. So, since the inception of 8th edition 40k, Games Workshop has presented players with the concept of the Freeways to play. Now, this is match play, narrative play, and open play. Now, personally, I think it should be 4 ways to play, but that's another conversation for another day. But again, what these are isn't so strictly set in stone as what I think some people can think they are. And for me, match play is where you get your best baseline competitive play experience, and it's where the main variable factors within the gameplay is either either list construction or player skill, and that's great. That's great for competitive and tournament play, and that's very much what match play kind of wants to be all about. For me though, I think that often is signposted as the core way to play, and it doesn't have to be. There's plenty of other ways to play, which we'll be talking about on this channel in the future. And then you've got open play, which I think is best for sort of more open-ended, loose objectives, simple gameplay. Just pick up and play with a friend. Maybe you've not played in years, or you really are just more interested in having a socializing period of time with friends and rolling dice, and less interested in really dialing in on the specifics of the gameplay. If you just want to roll dice and have fun, open play is the best way to do that. The open war deck exists for that, and again, we'll probably do a future video on that. But I actually think open play is great for really simplistic, straightforward games just for having fun. Or on the flip side of that, I actually think open play is the best place for playing things like anything goes scenarios, mega battles, recreating historical events if you want to replay or recreate rather the Battle of Hell's Reach or the Battle from the Crag, Devastation of Baal, and so on. I actually think open play is the best place to do that because you can do anything. So you can have an endless horde of a Tyranid army that is just going to keep battling for infinite number of turns until it kills the last Blood Angel. The open play lets you do that, and actually I think open play is probably the best place for that, if that's what you're looking for, to recreate historical events from the lore. And then we have the third way to play, narrative play. And for me, this is all more about having a really fun and cinematic gameplay experience and creating a game which is memorable for those moments that come up in the game, those really cool, conflicts or opportunities that come up that just tell a story in themselves. You're not necessarily trying to recreate a pre-written narrative like a historic game, but you're creating your own narrative, and you're focused on creating those cool stories more so than did you win by 100 victory points to 90 or whatever. If anything, I think that a big part of narrative play is the actual mission itself and the table, telling the story, and actually what you're trying to achieve is going to be part of the narrative of the game. And there's lots of additional gameplay rules and mechanics that exist to facilitate this. Theatres of war are one of the key things, which I'll talk about shortly, but rules that represent the environment that you're playing in, or the hazards that you're having to tackle, or possibly even the state of the current larger military campaign that's influencing this particular battlefield. Is one army particularly short of supplies? Has their command structure recently been destroyed? Has their fortress been broken open recently, or whatever? It could be anything. And actually, these really fun gameplay mechanics, they are there. They're all part of the official publications from Games Workshop, but they don't get talked about a great deal, and they don't get a lot of coverage because, understandably so, they don't really fit very well with the competitive matched play gameplay environment. And that's because quite often these rules, they're not going to be ridiculously swinging or over the top. It might just be some stuff that's like, the terrain does mortal wounds to you because it's part of a hazardous death world. It could be that there's going to be like an off the battlefield environment effect that's going to come into play. It could be a lava field that's rolling in, or a dam that's going to break open and flood the board, stuff like that. And it has gameplay mechanics, but these are mechanics which often will be considered too abstract, too weird, or possibly too random for match play. But actually, they really help tell the story of the game. And anything that feels like it's just a little too out there for match play, I think is perfect at home in narrative play. So yeah, I think there's definitely elements of this game that exist which are incredibly fun to play with, but could be considered unbalanced for match play environments, and that's why they often get overlooked. Now, in addition to that, I also think there's a number of misconceptions relating to narrative play, which I think will be worth looking at now. So when talking about misconceptions that I think that people can have about narrative play, I want to talk first of all about the things which narrative play can be, certainly can be, but does not by any means have to be. And I think that often these are the things which can dissuade or intimidate people about getting involved in narrative play. Now, first of those, I've sort of mentioned already, is this idea that narrative play does not have to mean historic play. It does not have to mean recreating particular events from the lore, or using particular characters from the lore and so on in order to be telling a story. You can play a narrative game with Ghazghkull without it being set on Armageddon. There's plenty of opportunities for Ghazghkull to be other places fighting other wars at any point in history. But if you want to create a game for an Armageddon game, go for it, of course you can. But it doesn't mean that's the only place that Ghazghkull is limited to for narrative play. Just as a good example off the top of my head. Secondly, one of the things that I think is often assumed about narrative play is that it has to be part of a campaign. It has to be part of some long-running string of connected games. In particular, this is pushed a little bit by Games Workshop with the advent of 9th edition and the advent of Crusade. Now, Crusade I do think is great. I love Crusade. I would love to do some Crusade content for the channel, and I'm planning to in the future. But not all narrative play has to be Crusade, which again, I feel like the distinction between match play and competitive play is a bit blurred, and now in 9th edition, I think the distinction between narrative play and Crusade is a little bit blurred, and you don't have to play Crusade in order to be playing narrative play. One of the key examples of this I find is actually with the Crusade mission packs, and the fact that the missions in those Crusade mission packs are just great missions. They are great for just playing a pickup game of 40k. I mean, they're kind of intended for that, with the whole idea that Crusade players can pick up their Crusade force and play any other player's Crusade force. They don't have to be intrinsically linked narrative games. But beside that point, they're just great missions. They're a ton of fun. They're not always perfectly symmetrical in concept. You can have asymmetrical objectives. You can have one player trying to achieve something while the second player is trying to achieve something different. They have interesting deployments and setups and objective layouts and all sorts. There's over 100 or so plus of these missions now across the different sizes of game in 9th edition, and that's 100 plus different missions that do not appear in any GT mission pack that you can be playing in 9th edition. They've been written for 9th edition, but because they're in the Crusade mission packs, again, people might think you have to play Crusade to do that. No, you don't. I love playing tons of missions from the Crusade mission packs. They're going to be the foundation of the missions that we pick to play in battle reports on the channel. And we're going to tell you where they're coming from and which source book they're from, and you can play them yourself. And I really encourage people to do so, because the mission often can tell the story. And a great story can be the foundation of a great game. One of the other misconceptions I think people have about narrative play is that you need to be able to create your own custom missions and special rules, and you really don't. Like, you don't have to create things from the ground up. You don't have to write your own missions. Plenty of these missions exist. Plenty of these environment rules exist. Lots of cool special rules. And all you have to do is just pull them together to play a game. That's what I do. I take missions from Crusade mission packs, Warzone supplements. I take Theatres of War for environment rules from similar places, White Dwarfs, Warzone supplements again, and so on. And all of a sudden, you have a game where you're battling over a derelict installation with objective markers which are arcing energy between them as ancient power grids are being activated. And that's going to be something which is going to tell a story in itself. And I didn't have to create my own custom rules for how the energy grid is going to be working, or how to determine where the next volley of loose energy is going to arc from A to B to C. It's all there. It exists as a theatre of war. So yeah, you don't have to be a mission crafter to be able to play narrative play. Or you don't even need to know somebody who is. You can find and pick up these missions from Games Workshop themselves and have a great time with them. I don't think that narrative play has to be unbalanced play, which I think is another thing that some people are often put off by. They think that a narrative mission has to inherently have a predetermined winner or an army that it's in favour of, and if you play a unbalanced mission, it's going to be inherently an uphill struggle for one of the armies. It doesn't have to be at all. Like I say, narrative play games can be very well balanced. They can be very tactically nuanced, and player skill can be a thing that determines how well you win or lose your game. That doesn't mean it doesn't have to be narrative experience to achieve that. Similarly, I don't think you need to have really deep written homebrew lore, which a lot of people think, I'm only really going to get into narrative play if I'm the kind of person where I have bespoke written backstories for each of my characters and units. You don't. You can pick up and play with your standard, Strike Force GT army, but throw them in a scenario where they're playing a narrative mission, and suddenly the fact that you're not attempting to achieve secondaries with your MSU units, and you're not trying to space out into table quarters in order to make sure that you've got a spread of the board, because actually the mission you're playing is all about breaking through the enemy line, or reaching an evac point, or activating a bunch of energy nodes. Like, that's going to tell a story. It doesn't have to be a custom chapter with their own character names and everything else written into hours and hours of predetermined homebrew lore in order to play narrative play. So I guess what I'm sort of saying with this is that I think a lot of the misconceptions about narrative play is that it's going to be a lot of hard work, and it really doesn't. Like, it can be straightforward as picking a randomly determined mission from a Crusade mission pack and picking a randomly determined theatre of war to go with it. And there you go, you've got a narrative mission. It doesn't have to be weeks of pre-planning and campaign settings and knowing the motivations of the characters involved. It doesn't have to be. It can totally be that, but it can also just be a pick up and play game. I've had pick up and play games with people I've met for the first time before at game clubs or events or similar, and I've just said, hey, do you want to try playing a narrative mission with me? And here, this is what I suggest we do. We'll play this mission with this environment sets, away we go. And we've had a great time. And people have loved it and often had a new perspective on what narrative play can be. And that's what I'm hoping to be able to promote with this channel. One of the takeaways is that I don't think narrative play has to be all about some big, deeply thought out in-universe game within the setting and the lore. It can be a pick up and play game. It can be, most importantly, opportunities to tell your own stories. To tell your own stories from game to game, from battle to battle, and it doesn't have to be part of a larger sprawling campaign with a whole ton of extra hard work thrown into it. It can be simple, straightforward, and a lot of fun. So I've touched on the basics already of how I personally like to set up and play a narrative game, but essentially it comes down to sort of three main elements. One is the mission. I will go and I'll pick a mission from a Crusade mission pack, Warzone supplement, White Dwarf publication, even the core rules, have a bunch of narrative missions in there. And I'll pick one which just looks fun, interesting, something I've not done before. Or if, say, I've played all of the ones from a given Crusade pack, I'll try and pick one that I know my opponent hasn't played before. And feeling that would just roll dice because they are a ton of fun. But yeah, I'll go and find one of these missions which, to be honest, could be considered balanced. They are a pitched battle between two players, bringing an army like you would do to a match play scenario. And then just play your game. But the difference is that on top of that, I'll then want to create a gorgeous looking table, a wonderful battlefield setup, which doesn't have to be symmetrical. It doesn't have to be mirrored terrain setups. It's definitely not going to include just a bunch of L-shaped ruins. I love telling a story with terrain itself, so if a building is a collapsed ruin, then it'll be something that looks like it was a structure at some point and is now collapsed. I'll have buildings that match the road layout on a battle mat, and so on. Just little touches like that will really help tell that story. And then the other big one for me personally is then having theatre of war rules to represent that battlefield. Rules that represent, is there an avalanche that's going to be, coming through the board as turns progress? Is it going to be that there's a highly irradiated degrading effects that are slowly weakening the armour and weapons of the armies involved? Is there going to be orbital debris, crashing down from a spaceship battle overhead? A whole bunch of things, which again, all these things exist and have been put out there by Games Workshop for the past 2, 3, 4 years plus, and honestly, they are one of the key components I find for really making a fun narrative game in 9th edition 40k. So, to sort of sum that up, find a good, fun mission. Crusade mission packs are a great place for that, but you can also find some just in the core rulebook. Like, if you've got the core rules, you've got some Crusade missions. Give them a try. You don't have to play the Crusade rules to do it, just play some of the Crusade missions. Find yourself some theatres of war. If you've got issues of White Dwarf lying around, go back through the last 12 months, you'll find some in there. Anything that's got a Flashpoint article in it has a good chance of having some theatre of war rules in there. Or if you've got any of the Warzone supplements from the last 12 months, then again, there'll be some theatre of war rules in there. Give them a try. And if you just want to ease yourself into this, or you want to just try some of these things but not all of them at once, then I would suggest that, first of all, try a familiar mission, play it with a Theatre of War. See how adding those environmental effects add to the experience. Play a GT mission if you want, but just play it with some environmental rules. Maybe in addition to that, try playing just some games without secondaries, even if it's a GT mission. But if you play without secondaries, then it's going to divide the attention of the game less. It's going to free up army building opportunities for you to take units you want to play with and have more fun with. And having a more linear objective in mind, i.e. just the primaries, is going to tell the story more, because that's the key thing that everyone there is battling about and fighting over, not randomly trying to say move around the table to hold table quarters or other stuff whilst whatever the reason for that battle taking place is happening. Then once you've tried both of these individually, put them together. Play a Crusade mission, throw in a Theatre of War, and you've got yourself a great narrative game experience. Even if it's just a one-off game or a pickup game with somebody new, it's going to be different and it's going to tell a story, and you're going to love it. And that really is going to be the core of the Narrative Wargamer experience. I'm hoping to showcase a whole bunch of these missions in future battle reports. And if all of that sounds really interesting and exciting and just a bit different for you and makes you want to go out and try some of these games, then for one thing, that's great. Two, it's not hard to do, so I absolutely encourage you to go try it. But three, if you want to sort of try this kind of thing, we actually run the Crucible of War, which is our own event here in the UK. It takes place in Derbyshire near Nottingham, and we ran an event earlier this year and it was a huge success. All the missions played in that event are Crusade missions or other mission publications taken from other sources from 8th and 9th edition 40k, paired off with thematic Theatre of War rules and gorgeous looking tables that represent those environments. And we play these games as an event, 1 day event, 3 games, but they'll be some of the most unique and narrative experiences that you could have an event day. So if you want to give this a try yourself, play it at home, play it with your friends, but if you also want to come join us at the Crucible of War, that's great, come get involved. The next event is in October, and details for it will be in the description of this video below. I'm sure there'll be some future videos talking about the Crucible of War and some of the experiences players have had, and yeah, we hope that you guys are interested in it and get involved. Now, if anything at all I've spoken about in this video sounds interesting to you, then again, one, please like and subscribe, because there's going to be more stuff like this in the future. There's going to be some of these very battles I've talked about today taking place on the channel. We're just starting out now as a YouTube channel, and we're hoping to grow the channel and the community and everything that we can put out there for you guys to really enhance your experience of narrative play. But also, go check out the Narrative Wargamer Podcast. That's been running now for a few years. We have a great time over there, and we talk about all this sort of stuff in depth, about all the different aspects of narrative play in 40k and the stuff that comes out with the new releases as we go forward in the edition, and we have a great time. So go check out the podcast, like and subscribe to the channel, and hopefully we'll see you guys in the future. And yeah, until next time, this has been Narrative Wargamer, helping you guys to discover more ways to play 40k.